Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Human Development, Health, Education, and Youth and Children Day at COP29, first day of the second week, and quite appropriately, session on school meals in the CGIAR pavilion. This session is called Next Generation School Feeding, Nourishing Our Children While Building Climate Resilience. My name is Daphne Ewing Chow. I'm a food and climate writer and a senior contributor with Forbes. And I happen to really be into school meals right now. I think it's really having its moment from a policy perspective around the world. Obviously, right now, today, is the beginning of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, and they're launching the Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger. And school meals is up front and center in Brazil right now. I actually was reading the other day, President Lula of Brazil said investing in food security and nutrition for the younger generations is an investment in development and in ending inequality. And I think those hit on just some of the benefits of school feeding programs. If you guys want to get involved, maybe some of you can just shout out some other benefits of school feeding. If anyone has any thoughts, I'm going to throw out until I hear other people give their suggestions, but gender equality, educational improvements, changing culture and norms around nutritional foods. And obviously there's the climate aspect of it, economies, anyone, food security, and obviously livelihoods and creating markets. So today's session is we're going to talk about homegrown school feeding. And I think there's a lot of understanding around how this impacts livelihoods, but maybe not as much of an understanding from the climate perspective. And so we have an amazing set of professionals with us today who are going to be talking to us about this. They've been involved in the ICANN initiative that was launched in COP27. The School Meals Coalition report that was launched in COP28 and various CGIAR initiatives. So I'm really looking forward to talking with them. We're going to have a keynote from Sylvia Pastorino from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So welcome, Sylvia, and she's right here. And then we're going to launch into two panels. The first panel is going to focus on planet-friendly menus and food waste, clean cooking and the youth. And the second panel is going to focus on sustainable farming, education, and finance. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Sylvia, to give your keynote about planet-friendly school feeding.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Daphne. So I want to start talking. I'm going to introduce basically what the session is about, and why is it so important to talk about school feeding, but also about the next generation school feeding. What do we mean by that? Mainly, we talk about school meals programs that not only can nourish people and children in their community, but it can also serve as a leverage for food system transformation in the way that they become more climate resilient. So there's probably no need to talk a lot about in these slides because you all know that there is a strong need to change food system as they are. There is widespread food insecurity. About 3 billion people are unable to afford a healthy diet as it stands at the moment. There's also a strong nutrition crisis, and we talk about the majority of people now on the globe have some kind of form of malnutrition, either undernutrition or obesity or deficiency in micronutrients. As well as this, there is strong inequality in the way the food is distributed, and 1/3 of all food is wasted. At the same time, food systems have a strong effect on the environment. They are responsible for about 1/3 of all human-induced greenhouse gas emission, 70% of water use, and they're the main driver biodiversity loss, mainly because of the effects on the land usage, as well as a strong polluter and causing ocean acidifications. This in turn is this effect that has on climate change. In turn, the climate change has an effect on the food production. Obviously, the change in climate can disrupt food productivity, increase in droughts and floods. It's the same. Climate change also an effect on health, increasing the food and waterborne illnesses. And all these environmental changes impact us. Specifically, going to have a stronger impacts on the global south, because they're going to be the one that is already currently disrupted by climate change. And in particular, they're going to have a strong effect on children. As the UNICEF report last year estimated about 1 billion children lives in countries that are at risk of the climate crisis. And the interconnectivity between climate change, food production, and food security is really well shown in these two pictures. On one side, the food system is responsible for food security, for the food development of human capital, and also about the impact on the environment. On the other side, the climate change that is partly caused by the food and unsustainable food production and food consumption patterns has an effect on production, and ultimately has an effect on food security and nutrition. So it's really a two-way system, so that we cannot change one without changing the other. They has to be considered at the same time. So why SchoolMeal? SchoolMeal are increasingly recognized as a great and unique opportunity to address some of these challenges, both the nutrition and the environmental challenges. SchoolMeal are considered one of the largest safety nets worldwide. They currently they feed more than 418 million children every day. For some children, this is their only or the most nutritious meal of the day. Also, they can be changes that can be delivered at scales, because these are changes that's mostly financed by government themselves. So government can make big changes and they can control this. And the investment goes straight into their own human capital development. And finally, there is a recognition that is they are a platform, cross-cutting platform for multiple intervention with many benefits. As Daphne was saying before, the benefits are so many that it's difficult to enumerate them in one slide. But think about, for example, the increase in education attainment, in school enrollment, decrease in dropout rate, especially for girls, and obviously in improvement in health and development of children and the well-being of the community. And the power of SchoolMeal has been recognized by many countries, so much so that in 2021, a group of countries came together to form the SchoolMeal Coalition. The SchoolMeal Coalition is a government-led coalition of countries that is a multilateral coalition with the aim of improving and scaling the SchoolMeal worldwide. As you can see now, has reached 106 countries, I think, so far, and is rapidly increasing. Many more countries are joining the coalition. In a few years from when he started. This really shows the commitment from countries recognizing that investment in these programs is for their own benefit, for the benefit of the future. So the SchoolMeal Coalition is also supported by 4 initiatives. One of these initiatives is the Research Consortium for School Health and Nutrition, which is where I work, which has a small secretariat at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. But this is just the secretariat, because really the coalition is like a global research organizations. It's actually a network of researchers rather than an organization. It's a network of researchers which is organized within community of practices. And for the research consortiums, I lead the planet-friendly school meal initiatives. And last year, we presented at COP28 in Dubai a white paper on planet-friendly school meals. The paper was developed, the report was developed in collaboration with more than 80 organizations globally and more than 160 contributors from a wide range of fields, like it were researchers, policymakers, people working in the field of school meals, and various stakeholders and organizations. And the report really, the idea was to come up with ways and key policy actions that that the government could implement that have the greatest impact on health and human development, and as well as the environment. So that the countries really, the report actually was developed at the request of country and government, because there is more and more interest from countries, yes, developing, expanding their school meal program, but they want to make this program also planet friendly. They want to make this program a platform that they can implement mitigation strategy, but also adaptation strategies. The report came up with two key parts. Key group of policy actions, some that could be implemented by government quite immediately, let's say that, and includes changes in menu and cooking, education, and food and loss, food waste and loss. These are things the government can do right now. The second part involved creating demand for more sustainable food that is produced in an ecological, regenerative way, and also that they develop a sustainable farming, commercial farming, farming network and system, so that, for example, connecting smallholder farms to schools and small businesses. And this year we have published with. We are starting actually to publish just right now, just today. We have the first paper that's going to come out in the Lancet Planetary Health as part of a special issue on planet-friendly school meals. The first paper has been published just today online. And this paper presents this planet-friendly school meal conceptual network framework. The framework is really it aims to simplify what are the key strategies and key entry points, and try to raise the global awareness of how this entry point can connect within each other's. So today we're going to have different speakers talking about some of these entry points and talking a little bit more about examples on how this what is the evidence, what are the benefits, but also what is the best policy action for the future, and how can government, both local and national, can really make changes. And as you can see from the framework, the key policy action that is part of the policy action, how the one I was talking before, is a menu, sustainable and climate resilience, predominantly plant-based, clean cooking solutions, so, that are powered by potentially, ideally, renewable energy solution, reducing food loss and waste, reducing plastic, and finally, we need to remember the importance of education and creating the sustainable, the action of tomorrow is really the children. If they create knowledge, but also build preferences for sustainable foods at the early stage, and knowledge that will really empower children to make changes tomorrow's. And the second part is talking more about creating procurement strategies, embedded these at the national levels in guidelines and recommendations, as well as linking sustainable farming practices and cooperations to school food procurement. So I'm gonna stop here. And I give you back to Daphne. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I think what really stands out for me is the wins from both the supply and the demand side, and linking demand from a very early age to markets, and it's so amazing and just really fantastic solution. I'd like to invite to the stage now Michael Mellon, and he's the head of people-centered programs at Sustainable Energy for All, and also Belinda Ng, youth advocate at Act for Food. And as you said, Sylvia, there's going to be covering of the different entry points for these school meals. But first, we'd just like to start with you with an analysis of food waste and planet-friendly diets. So back over to you.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. Yeah, so the first part of my talk is gonna be involve planet-friendly school meal menus. Now, I'm gonna talk about menus and food. How can we change food in school to be more nutrient-rich, but also climate resilient and diverse? So I want to highlight three key areas, policy actions that could be really game changers when you come to climate resilience and climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. Of course, when you talk about food in school, it has to be nutritionally balanced and healthy. But how to make it also climate resilient? How to make sure that the food also doesn't have a negative impact on the environment. And I wanted to highlight these three topics that are really interesting, hot topics, really. And the first one is the concept of agrobiodiversity. By this, we mean like bringing food that is more a range of different species that ideally are also more climate resilient. Some of these species, we want them to be drought resilient or flood resilient or whatever the climate and the local growing condition require. The idea is to shift away from the monoculture and from one single type of big food supply, kind of like diversifying the supply of food. The second part is like trying to draw from traditional and indigenous diets. Indeed, these diets often are based on agrobiodiversity because these diets often emphasize the use of, sometimes they call it traditional food, orphan food. There are different ways to define this kind of food, but often are food that are more niche, more underutilized. But they are at the same time food that are very, tend to be more resilient to climate. The idea is to bring this food back and not only would have a positive impact on nutrition, but also on the production side, because often these are the food that are more traditionally grown by smallholder farmers, sometimes in school gardens, sometimes they're not even accounted for when it comes to like the big menus. And the third part that we really need to emphasize, which is the key of climate of a planet-friendly school meal mitigation strategies, is like to shift or to predominantly plant-based diets. Of course, plant-based diets are already quite predominant in many parts of the world, especially in Africa, in the East, in Asia, and especially in India. But there are so many other parts where the reliance of animal food sources are having a negative impact on the planet. And some of these positive aspects of plant-based food can also have very strong impact on climate resilience, thinking about legumes that also fix nitrogen in the soil. These I just wanted to highlight some example of how this can be implemented. For example, in one of the districts in India, they have scaled up after a successful pilot, the adoption of small minor millets, which is a highly resilient and hardy crops that can sustain different environmental stressors. This has been implemented at the public procurement level. It's also connecting to small farmers cooperatives. So they have a source where it's produced, and then they make sure that the children get used to it and they accept it. Another example is Brazil, is a country that has done quite a lot to make school meal more diverse and more connected to smallholder farmers. But also they have a strong focus on biodiversity and agrobiodiversity. And so this is one of the many initiatives that is connected to the national school meal program, which is a well-known program that give at least 30% of the procurement to smallholder farmers. And this is one of the programs that try to introduce more biodiversity-friendly, underutilized traditional food into school meals. And finally, I was saying about more plant-based food. We need to remember that more need to be done in many high-income countries where the diet really need to be shifted and at the early stages. We need to not underestimate the power of shifting to more plant-based based food. I want tonight to talk a little bit more about reducing food loss and waste. So we know that about the latest UNEP report actually highlighted about 20% of all the food that is produced worldwide is wasted at the consumption level. This includes schools and various retails and households. And another 13% is wasted, is lost during the production and before it reaches the consumers. Together, this has an impact about is responsible for 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emission. It's a huge waste of resources and money. And waste in school is obviously, again, is a waste of resources and money, but also it's a bit of a lost nutrition when it comes to children. All the food that is straight, we ideally want to go straight to children or at least their communities. We don't have massive amount of data, but some data show there's about 20 to 30% of food is wasted in schools, and most of this waste is avoidable. There are different ways the school can reduce food waste when it comes to schools. So we are talking about food waste after it's produced, not the food loss. The key strategy is to start quantifying food waste. Indeed, this is something that is not done enough. There is not a lot of data, and more data is really needed on this, because once we know how much food is wasted and where it's wasted, then you can really do intervention. You can change strategy to maybe change how much food you procure, you prepare, and you serve. One country has done a lot, one at the forefront of planet-friendly school meals is Sweden. For example, they have created a tool to reduce food waste in schools, and then I think they can be downloaded from their website in English as well. Another way this is fundamental is to include children and other stakeholders at the school level when they come to monitor waste, because when children and other stakeholders are aware of how much food is wasted, then this really increases their awareness, and especially they can link to the waste of resources and they can empower them. Finally, we need to remember that the way food is disposed can have a huge impact on the environment. I think I'm running out of time probably, so maybe I'm going to try to speed up. We also think about other the food that is lost before it's reached consumers. Often is because of the poor technological infrastructure, poor technologies, technical problems like investment in infrastructures, renewable technology, improving coordination across all the partners can have a huge impact. And also thinking about low-cost, sustainable system like sustainable cooling system, especially in countries that might have less access to energy supplies. My last two slides, I'm going to be quite quickly, but I think it's some modeling that we have presented as part of the report. The white paper report, it was presented last year. We're going to publish now before the end of the year, I think, as part of the special issue in the Lancet Planetary Health. These are modeling impact that show what could be the impact on health and the environment of making some of the changes on the menu and waste. Very simplifying, this show what the impact on the reduction on diet-related diseases, chronic diseases that could be achieved is all meal well served in school worldwide were predominantly plant-based and predominantly whole plant-based, of course, whole foods. As you can see, the improvement will be achieved worldwide. And this shows what could be the environmental impact of the same menu, as well as reducing waste. As you can see, the impact will be like felt across all the impacts and income levels. So it's really a global win-win for both the health and environment for different communities. Finally, this is like a reminder you can join the research consortium for school health and nutrition and reach connect to other researcher, practitioner and policymakers, so to know the latest about school health and nutrition. We also held regular talk and workshops, and also there can be potential for research collaborations. And thank you for listening and giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Sylvia. And actually, you did quite well with times. I found that to be really fascinating, especially, the breakdown of the processes and making sure that procurement and design of menus is planet-friendly. Can you give me an example of a planet-friendly menu, what that would look like?
Okay, so I think one example of planet-friendly menu would be one. I can give you maybe one from high-income country, maybe, and one from maybe middle or low-income countries. So from high-income countries, would be an example. We have different cities now at the local government level. For example, Malmo in Sweden, Ghent in Belgium, and Milan in Italy. This city has really made a lot to shift to reduce the meat in the menu. For example, they are substituting the meat in the menu with much more whole food, plant-based foods. For example, lentils and beans. They are also increasing the vegetables, and they're also reducing the waste. For example, they are tracking the waste. They are checking how much is wasted, and then they are changing the menus weekly. So this is things that really have been implemented. Some of these cities use the World Research Institute's Cool Food Pledge to measure their environmental sustainability, and they have shown that they have significant GHG emission reductions. So they have been already quite successful. And an example of like planet-friendly school meal in another context, I think Kenya and Rwanda come to mind. They've done quite a lot lately. Both, for example, the president of Kenya has just launched the climate-friendly school meal initiative. So there is a lot of emphasis on cooking food that is more healthy, but also try to bring food that is more locally produced, and they're trying to explore ways to don't rely so much on imported food, for example, rice and bean, but more having locally produced type of bean and other type of whole grain that are really more sustainable when it comes to productions. And also linking to traditional and regional vegetables are really high nutritious.
Fantastic. I think you just reminded me of also the first ladies across a lot of the countries in Africa have done a really great job promoting school meals within the communities. Okay, the next presentation is with Michael, and he will be focusing on clean cooking. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Sylvia, for a very interesting presentation and highlighting all those benefits and opportunities indeed. So, and also a big thanks to the organizers for inviting us from Sustainable Energy for All to this session. We're an organization that was set up to help drive and accelerate progress on SDG 7, which is the goal on sustainable energy. That goal has 3 pillars. One is on energy access, one is about, and on energy access, it's about universal access to electricity, and it's universal access to modern fuels and energies for cooking. The other pillar, the more known pillar, is of course the need to ramp up the renewables, and then the third pillar is all about energy efficiency, so do more with less. Now, I'm going to zoom out to start with, and just to remind us on where we stand globally on clean cooking. Now, these data points are fairly sombering, given that we currently have 2.1 billion people without access to clean cooking globally. That's nearly 1 in 3 who do not have access to clean fuel. So that might translate into a lot of smoky kitchens, unhealthy cooking practices, with a lot of dire consequences obviously for people, the planet, but also overall prosperity. The other problem here is that with the current pace of progress, it's estimated that 1.8 billion people will still remain without access to clean cooking in 2030 if we don't do something about it. So there's certainly a lot that we can cry about looking at those data points. However, this gives reason to smile because the solutions are readily on the shelf. And I just wanted to show this slide to break it down a bit and say, I mean, what are we speaking about when we're speaking about clean cooking? So it's really to transition away from charcoal, kerosene, and unsustainably harvested wood, so biomass cooking, to improved cook stoves, pellets, briquettes, to the cleanest of them all, if the grid is clean, that is, electric cooking. There's ethanol, there's biogas, there's LPG, there's standalone solar for cooking. So these solutions already exist. So it's nothing new. We don't necessarily need to much innovate here to start making progress on it. Now, before tuning into the on how this links up with the schools and the nutrition agenda, by taking action on clean cooking, as I mentioned, there's those immediate health benefits for people. Currently, I think the WHO estimates that 3.2 million people die every year because of not having access to clean cooking. And these are some really catastrophic numbers to look at, often not seen out there. In addition to contributing roughly the same as the aviation industry in CO2 emissions, it's also burning the solid fuels in households for cooking is a massive contributor to black carbon emissions globally. And it's also a problem for prosperity. It's a problem specifically for women and children who need to collect that firewood. And as you've been into some of the geographies, I mean, if you look around, there's no forest to be seen, so these distances can become substantial. At the end of the day, you might be cooking with whatever you might find, with plastic or whatever that generates heat. So it's a real problem. Now, but the opportunity here again, and the reason to smile, is that once we tackle this, what you already spoke about both, is those many co-benefits across the SDG 7 agendas: gender, health, environment, poverty, etc. Now, why clean cooking is in schools is of particular interest now to us as well here and for this session today is that obviously households burn a lot, but institutions are the big drivers of biomass-based, unsustainable biomass-based cooking. And here obviously one of the leading ones are schools. And I think Silvia, you already pointed out that globally some 420 million kids get food, well, at least one school meal per day, which is great. But a lot of this food is cooked using biomass and stove technologies that are very inefficient, open fires often. So that's then the little bit of the problem. So, just to highlight with a few pictures what this means in practice, these pictures we got from our partner, the Rural Energy Agency in Tanzania, the recent pictures from Kagera region. So here's something that we launched earlier this year and where we got in touch with Silvia as well and got connected, is that Sustainable Energy for All, together with the World Food Programme earlier this year, launched a new partnership and joined hands to accelerate clean cooking, specifically targeting clean cooking in schools. And to walk the talk and to translate this partnership into action, we're proud to partner with the government of Tanzania, where the president herself has made clean cooking a top priority. And what we're going to be doing in Tanzania is to support that transition with concrete works to do so. I wanted to perhaps, before speaking a bit of what we're going to be exactly doing, just to highlight the magnitude of this in Tanzania. So in Tanzania, you roughly have 17,500 primary schools. Out of those 17,500 schools, roughly half, or 9,000, provide a school meal. Out of those 9,000 or 18,000 schools, nearly all cook with biomass currently. But 5,000 are already connected to the national grid. So they have access to electricity. So what we're doing with the World Food Programme and working with partners in this space is really targeting the low-hanging fruits, looking at schools that are already grid connected and helping them transition to electric cooking. And so what that means in practice is identifying the schools, doing some kitchen upgrades, deploying the solutions, then also having a big pillar on communications and awareness about this transition and the opportunity. We're also looking at carbon finance, to get carbon finance to flow in, to pay for that electricity, so the school can pay the electricity bill that they cook with, but also to make money to be able to scale and make this into a revolving mechanism. So starting with 50 schools, we hope soon to do 200 and the opportunities in the thousands, and then expand beyond the borders of Tanzania soon after. So this is the ambition that we've set ourselves with the World Food Programme. And very pleased with also the recent announcements of support from the UK, which has taken this agenda really by the horns and helping driving it. And we also got some initial funding for Tanzania from them. So perhaps I'll keep it there, but maybe before passing the mic back to you, there's something that also gives reason for hope. I mean, clean cooking really was the orphan agenda a few years ago. And only recently is it starting to make it on the radars. And at COP28 last year in Dubai, we launched the Global Electric Cooking Coalition at the main stage event together with the presidency. There was the IEA's Africa Clean Cooking Summit in Paris in April, May this year. Also, Sustainable Energy for All, together with the World Bank and the IEA, supported the Brazilian G20 presidency. And so there we supported the presidency in developing a clean cooking roadmap. And hopefully it will make it to the heads of state declaration at the end of the week in Rio. And then this is the momentum that we want to keep building on next year during COP30 as well, because the beautiful interlinkages between food, nutrition, gender, and all the other good things that we're here to do. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see how we can pass this mic between us for just one or two questions that I have. You were talking about the transition to clean cooking technologies, and of course, there are, challenges that come with any transition. First of all, you talk about, earlier you mentioned that if no change is made, there would still be 1.8 billion without clean cooking technologies. I'm going to ask you both questions that I have for you now because I have to pass the mic over. So my first question, and they're both related to challenges. One is, could you just tell me what some of the challenges are associated with this transition? Of course, there are cultural issues as well, because I know there are different types of indigenous cooking technologies that people might not want to get away from, and also the cost implications and how you can get around that. So those are two challenges I can think of, but.
Thank you. Thanks for those two questions. So I said, and I had that slide that showed that we have the solutions on the shelf, no? So this is often what we think, that we have the solution on the shelf, let's deploy them and then move onwards. But what we also realized, and myself personally realized some years ago only, that we really need to put much more emphasis on the awareness raising efforts that leads to acceptance and then eventually adoption. awareness, acceptance, adoption, to put it simply like that, because it's of course very important to have a process that accompanies this transition. So therefore, like in Tanzania, what we're doing, we have a strong capacity building component built into it, so that it's not, we're going to develop the cookbooks, we're going to have materials, instructions in Swahili, we're going to have people have training courses with the chefs making these meals. We're going to have a youth component built into it, so we're launching an internship program, and we're going to have young female recent graduates that are going to accompany this project from start to finish. And so really to engage and get more youth involved, get more women involved in the sector. We know in the energy sectors there's very few. It would be better to get more, so this is a good way to attract them, we hope, and also to build that local capacity, because I mean there's no we cannot have the illusion that sitting with a remote control in New York or Vienna or Stockholm, for that matter, you'll be able to generate any change. So that local capacity building, have the local champions drive that transition. Now, the schools in themselves make it a bit of an easier audience for us, because the school menus are often simpler, perhaps. And there are not these are meals that are prepared like hopefully every day in every school, but these are like something, so we're seeing that they might be easier to push for that than to try to transition all the households overnight to clean cooking, where some of those hard persisting affection perhaps to wood fuel and charcoal might be a bit stick in a bit harder. A final thought on that is that also why schools is interesting is that schools obviously are the platforms where we hope to reach the community through the chef, the teachers, the parents, but also the students. One could hope becomes the champions of change at the household level. There's nothing more powerful than the kid pulling the mother's or father's sleeve and say, asking for something, having seen it in practice in the school. So that's it on that first question. Now, a quick point on finance, which is also the theme of COP29. I think the IEA estimated already a few years ago that the fossil fuel subsidies are in the trillion plus. To tackle the global challenge on clean cooking, we're talking single-digit billions. So it really is an investment that makes so much sense from a socio-economic point of view, health, gender, environment, so really people and planet, but also prosperity. And that's the encouraging sign that we're seeing, that there's really these opportunities to have modern cooking already is much cheaper in urban settings in Africa than LPG, charcoal, and some of the other fuels. So I can continue, but perhaps in the interest of time, I'll bring it back.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think what really gets me excited is the whole opportunity to change culture right through the front door when we're dealing with children and inspire cultural change from an early age. Our next presentation is Belinda, and Belinda's going to be focusing on the youth. And of course, she's with Act for Food.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm really happy actually to come last, because both Sylvia and Michael have mentioned some really good examples of how young people can get involved directly in school feeding programs and really create that impact that we need. So just to give a quick intro on Act for Food. So my name is Belinda. I am the UK and Hong Kong youth leader for Act for Food. We're a global youth movement that was founded after the UN Food Systems Summit to continue the youth momentum and engagement with food systems transformation. We are supported by GAIN, and we are youth-led. So you can see in the photo, this is this year's cohort of our 30 youth leaders from around the world, and we engage in global advocacy as well as local level community action on food systems transformation across these 10 priorities. These are what 160,000 young people have voted on that they want to see governments make an impact on and really drive that multi-sector collaboration. You can see number 3 is particularly relevant for today's conversation. And so I'm going to focus my sharing mainly on, how youth can and should be involved in food systems and food school meal programs in particular, and also give some concrete examples of that. So, to my first point, youth involvement is really essential. I'll share some examples of this. In particular, because youth are co-designers, they are co-leads, and they're advocates that ensure school feeding programs are really tailored to their needs, very context specific, and also in terms of long-term sustainability, viability, and uptake. So to give the first example of the role of advocacy, Dev over there in the photo, in the UK context, UK has a free school meal program, and during the COVID pandemic, he basically created a campaign to ensure that those free school meals continued when lockdown and schools weren't open to support children in need. So that's really the importance of ensuring that needs are fully being met and school meals are accessible. The example on top is from my home city in Hong Kong. So the Alliance for Sustainable Schools in Hong Kong created an initiative where they got students to work together with local chefs as well as sustainable food experts to design their own low carbon menu for their school meal. And the value of that from the student standpoint is that they get education on the climate considerations, for example, the value of plant-based diets that Sylvia mentioned, and they also actually pick meals that they really want to keep having, and that really ensures the uptake and long-term viability of these solutions as well. So yeah, these are some examples of the importance of youth involvement. So I want to share a little bit more now in terms of what other supplementary aspects of school meals are important, which is food nutrition education, and that's something a lot of the agri-food youth leaders have been working on. What's really important is that these education programs are, context specific, but thematically very holistic. So if I give the first example from our youth leader, Jeffrey, who you can see speaking, this is in Ghana, and what he's done is create a nutrition program that supplements the school feeding programs in the school. So they're teaching students to make healthier choices. But not only that, he's working with local women in the market, so you can see on the right-hand side, to really have them share their knowledge to the students about where the food comes from. So he's leveraging very local, community-specific sources of knowledge in this education that's really supplementing sustainable choices when it comes to food. Another example in Indonesia from our youth leader, Razaz, who's launched an initiative called Health Heroes Goes to School, and basically teaching students how to read nutrition labeling so they can make better choices outside of the schoolyard as well. And that's how school meal programs can play an important role inside, but in terms of the choices that students go on to make outside, that's also a really important component that our youth leaders are working on. And finally, on kind of the holistic aspect of education, like connecting students to where food comes from. So you can see some examples here in the UK and also in Nigeria. So in the UK, Global Generation is an NGO that's working to bring children to gardens and really connect them to where the food is coming from and have them grow their own produce. And a project that I'm leading in the UK as well is linking nutrition education with financial education, so it's really embedded and holistic in terms of the choices they make. In Nigeria, similarly, this is their school food feeding program, but they've launched their own sustainable food hub as well, where the children are growing their own food and they're cooking and eating that, as well as selling that in the market to make money for continuing this program in itself as well. So it's really, really important that young people are at the center of these conversations around school meals, not just as beneficiaries, but also as co-leads and co-designers of initiatives that are really making an impact. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Belinda. And I'm going to ask you both questions together so that we don't have to go back and forth. First, I'm just going to give a really shameless plug for another GAIN initiative, the Food Culture Alliance, which I am one of the lead group members of. And you were just talking about such amazing cultural examples of promoting planet-friendly school meals. And it's just such a great example of creating cultural change and behavior change that's positive from the earliest stage. That's awesome. But what are some of the challenges, I'm wondering, to getting youth involved? Obviously, you're a very active movement at Act for Food, but there are kids around the world that, or young people, I shouldn't even just say kids because the youth aren't just kids, that might not feel as empowered to be involved in the change. So I'm wondering what some of the challenges are, and adding to that, what can NGOs in the public and private sector do to help support in this transition?
Yeah, so on the first point on what are the challenges, the main thing is scale. These initiatives are all run by very passionate young people at a very grassroots level. And for it to be really scalable, it needs to be embedded into the education curriculum. We need to have food nutrition, food literacy part of the training for teachers in order to really create really solid monitoring and evaluation frameworks as well that can then ensure the continuity of the success and the impact of these initiatives. So there's definitely ways for youth to get involved in this process as well, to make sure that when they're working with teachers, for example, that at a school level, it's very context specific in terms of how these programs are being designed and being rolled out. I think in response to your second question, the importance of partnerships, like working with different sectors, 100% really need to bring in the private sector here as well. In the example I mentioned earlier with Hong Kong, that was the private sector, the caterer had a really key role in playing, and the youth and the students are the key consumers. So it's in their best interest to really understand what are their choices that they're making and how they can play a role in shaping that from a nutrition standpoint, but also from things like a food waste or a climate standpoint as well. So in that sense, these collaborations and communications to really understand each other's interests are really important. And I want to give a really quick example of how, from a policy standpoint, this is being done by one of the youth leaders, Aziz, in Nigeria. So he, a couple years ago after the UN Food System Summit, set up national dialogues with the Ministry of Agriculture, and he brought together young people from across the agricultural value chain who were subject matter experts in their own right of what's needed to really create a more sustainable food system. And a key part of that was actually elevating the nutrition agenda when it comes to the foods that were being served in schools. And so he created this form of very robust dialogue where young people were really, seen as collaborators rather than being just consulted on what they wanted to see in policy. And so I think I see the same thing needing to be done from an education system standpoint. Can we rethink, for example, what kind of education young people get around food, sensory education perhaps around school meals, how they taste different products that they're being served, and thinking about where it comes from. That's a lot of the examples that young people have been doing that I've shown that I really think can be scaled with more of a systemic approach and support to these programs.
Thank you so much, Belinda. I think that's so exciting, the way you can integrate young people into this movement. So what we're going to do now is start a new panel. So I'm going to ask this group to step down and panel part 2 to step up. And the second part of our panel consists of Ana Maria Loboguero. Thank you so much. And she is the Director of Adaptive and Equitable Food Systems at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Richard Kachungu. He is the Executive Director of the Young Emerging Farmers Initiative. And Saul Morris. He is the Director of Program Services at GAIN. So Anna, we're going to start with you, and you're going to be looking at sustainable farming, correct?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to stand up because my jet lag is started to kick in. So I think that I can deliver my message in a better way like this. So I'm going to just present the story of one of the projects that is related to the topic that we are discussing today. And it's a very nice story, and you're going to see why I said that it's a story about transformation, because that's where we saw a lot of like these big changes at community level. And I believe that the homegrown school feeding was a really important component of that. So I'm just going to show a series of pictures that describe a little bit this story of transformation that happened in Colombia some years ago. So this started back in 2014, and this was part of a program of the CGIAR on climate change, agriculture, and food security. And one of the key tools that we were using in that program at that time was something that we call the climate smart villages. And these climate smart villages and this program was a global program operating in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. At that point of time, again, this was back in 2014, I was leading the work in Latin America. And these climate smart villages was a very, I would say, to put it in few words, was participatory research on climate smart agriculture. So it was basically working with communities, different communities in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and then scientists and communities working together on trying to understand what was needed for scaling climate smart agriculture. So we were thinking about increasing productivity and resilience at the same time that we were working on adaptation and as much as possible working also on mitigation. So and this was, if you remember at that time, climate smart agriculture was a concept that was starting to emerge, and it was a very like high level concept up in the earth. And what we were trying to do with the climate smart villages was to like put that concept on the ground. And climate smart agriculture was something that we used to say that, you know, something that it's very interesting and successful in terms of being climate smart agriculture in one place, under some circumstances could not be in other place and the other type of circumstances. And so this was what the climate smart villages were trying to do. We're trying to understand how these different technologies were related to other aspects such as culture, policy, economic and social environments, and what were the factors that could determine if these practices were successful or not. And it was a really interesting case. The story that I'm going to tell was happening in one of these climate smart villages in Colombia, in Cauca, in a community called Los Cerrillos. And this was a very dynamic community, and it became, as much as scientists were going to the community and, you know, measuring greenhouse gas emissions and trying to assess if the impacts of climate extremes were reduced, there was a lot of learning from the community to the scientists in terms of understanding these different environments that needed to be considered for being successful in terms of implementing these climate smart agricultural practices. So that's the work that started in this climate smart village. And one of the things that we started with the community was to think about local adaptation plans. And really the community was driving the prioritization of these actions and interventions. And one of the things that emerged from the very early time of this work was the need to have water all year long. And, you know, because of climate variability, then the community was suffering because of the lack of water in some specific months of the year. So we started implementing these water harvesting techniques, which are going to be relevant for the vegetable home gardens, and it was really successful. So we started also to bring low-cost weather stations to use climate information to try to analyze beforehand when we were going to have precipitation that was going to be below normal or above normal, and that was very useful in terms of understanding how to collect and to harvest this water, with a very interesting outcome, which was that with that water harvesting techniques, we could make these vegetable home gardens a reality. Previously, the community was really hoping to grow vegetables because they wanted to have more diversification in their diets, because they saw a lot of opportunities in terms of selling them in Popayan, in the closest city. So they saw a little bit of increasing in incomes in relation to that, but they were not successful because of climate variability that was becoming a great challenge in this community because of the lack of water in some months of the year, as I mentioned. But now that we had the water harvesting techniques, that we had as well the climate information services together in a bundle, then this idea of the vegetable home gardens started to take like shape. And so we started discussing different ways of these vegetable home gardens, and they were tested in some of the houses of some members of the community. But then Adriana, she's currently the one that is leading the work in the daycare, she said, you know, I want to start doing something in relation to these vegetable home gardens in the daycare. And that's where the transformation started. Because it started just from idea from Adriana. We were having the water harvesting techniques using the climate information. And then she started working with the kids. And the kids were the ones that were taking care of these vegetables. This was a community that was not used to eat vegetables before because it was not part of a little bit what they were used to. This was a community that was growing coffee, that was growing sugar palm, but that was challenging with these two crops because of climate change as well. So this need of diversification, of exploring other opportunities for other crops was starting to emerge. So Adriana started to get the kids excited about the vegetables because they were the ones that were taking care of them. So they didn't want to eat lettuce or tomatoes, and now they started to change the way that they were relating to food in general, but more because they were really connected to these vegetables that they were growing. So, and it started to work really well, and it started to grow, and Adriana was also using the opportunity to talk about the environment, the importance of taking care of the soil, the importance of the health of the soil, and they started to see, and these were kids that were 4, 5, 6 years old, and they started to see how the soil was changing with the techniques that they were using. They were using the residues from the daycare to do compost and put it in the soil. So a huge change in terms of the perception of, these kids as individuals had with the soil, with the vegetables, and they started asking for that for their lunches. So they came from not wanting to eat vegetables at all to really demanding that, and it was a huge a huge change in the community in terms of their nutrition. And then these same kids, since Adriana was doing a really good job, and they started to have more incomes based on all the vegetables that they were producing, and they started to think what to do with that extra income, and they were strengthening materials that were needed for the daycare. So all this cycle started to emerge. Another really interesting cycle that started to emerge was that these kids were going to their houses and talking to their parents and engaging with their older brothers and sisters and telling a beautiful story about sustainability, about the importance of understanding and working with the environment, about the importance of taking care of the soil. One of the key challenges when we started interacting with this community that they had was that the young people in the community was ready to leave this place. Their hope was to go to the closest city, which is Popayan, but not to study. What the future for this generation was to go and drive a taxi, because that's what they said that they wanted to do. And the community they were really worried about this because they were landowners, but their kids, the next generation, didn't even care about understanding those connections with the land. So these kids that were part of this movement that started with Adriana, they went and they talked to their parents, they talked to their brothers and sisters, and one of the, I would say, things that emerged from that was Daniela. Daniela was the older sister of one of those kids that you saw in that community. She started to get really connected to what was happening, to the potential, to the opportunity, to the role of this young generation in terms of making a difference. And then all of a sudden, when she finished high school, and this was during all this process, she decided that she was going to go to Popayán, not to drive a taxi, but to study agronomy, because she wanted to understand better what was happening, how she could contribute to make a better place, and all the things that could emerge from that. So this is why I think that this is a very, like, the kind of transformation that we would like to see, how you, through, started with the water harvesting, with the climate information, bundling that, making sure that the community that was struggling with climate threats was able to, like, get together, work on these vegetables, how the kids were part of that, how they were bringing the message to their families, and how you could see at least changing the life of one of these young people in this community. And this is actually why, and this is the entry point, why I started getting so excited about these school feeding programs. And so back in 2022, I guess, with Danny and Daisy, we put together this paper. And it was not only about that story that I told, but was my motivation to get involved in that paper was because of that story. And one of the things that we highlighted in that paper was somehow how to scale these things, because we all have beautiful stories, but they're still pilots. And how do we make sure that we go from having just these beautiful stories in these specific places to having all those kids that Silvia was talking about benefiting from these programs? And so we did a little bit of analysis in relation to who needs to be involved in terms of this scaling approach. And so we talk about the importance of civil society, of countries, the research community itself, making the case of why this is so important, all the benefits that can emerge, international development organizations, obviously the farmers, the community themselves, and business. And why, and perhaps something that I want to, two messages that came from this analysis. The first one is that you need a variety of stakeholders to make this happen, to scale this. But the second one is that you need the policy environment also to make it work. And somehow we need a connection and a dialogue between these different scales, all the way from the work that is happening at the community level to speak to the national level in terms of having the right policy environment that can incentivize to mobilize resources and investment to scale this kind of approaches. Let me stop there, sorry, thanks.
Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful storytelling approach and such a beautiful story. I love how the children felt so connected to the food that they were growing. It's fabulous, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of commonalities between your presentation and that of Richard. So my question to you, I know you're talking about a project that you did with CGIAR, and you've been heavily involved in a number of projects. I see through your bio, it's the Climber project, and the Climate Change Agriculture and Food Security Program project, and then another project in Ghana, yes. How can these projects, that might not necessarily be specific to school meals, be integrate with the school meals programs?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So there are a lot of projects happening, and more, like along my career, what I have found really useful is to really understand, to make these connections. Because especially coming from research and academia, obviously we want to focus on, specific things, and we want to really understand why this is happening, and we come up with models, and we want to collect more and more information. We want to have a strong case, all the support, all the evidence that it's needed. And that's good, obviously, because we understand part of the problem. But this is what once that you get into all these issues about nutrition, climate change, agrobiodiversity, gender, you start to see that there are issues with just concentrated in a small part of the problem. So the more that we can connect these different dimensions using models, using outcomes, stories and harvesting, the better that we are going to be able to make the case for scaling these things that we believe that can make a change. And this is what I have been trying to do in those projects that you mentioned. The Climber was really that, trying to really understand how we are linking resilience, climate resilience, to social resilience. And that's where you get like all these nuance when you work with communities, when you work with cultural aspects. So I think that something that can really help, it's really trying to have a holistic approach of the problem. How are we putting these different concepts together to make a case of something that we believe that can change things? The other project that I was leading in Africa was basically speaking about the scaling. And it was a really interesting project because it was, you know, the CGIAR, we have been working on delivering innovations and technologies for 50 years in relation to climate, to address climate challenges. You would be surprised of how many of those technologies have been adopted at scale. Very few. Or at least we would like to see more. And this project, what it was trying to do in Africa, is to understand what was needed to scale climate smart agriculture, climate information services. And it was a combination of thinking about partnerships. I think that partnerships are key for making these things work. So really being serious about transdisciplinary approaches, capacity enhancement for the different actors that are part of this, and then being able to really respond to the needs of whoever is going to be benefiting from that. Being very responsive to demands. So I think that that's something that needs to be in this case as well. How do we, this community of stakeholders, and this was a really nice example of, you know, coming from the energy angle, coming from the education angle, coming from the youth angle. How do we make sure that we are speaking the same language and that we are able to see these connections between these different dimensions that at the end are going to have a result in terms of improving livelihoods? Lastly, and I just finished with that, now at the foundation, what I'm doing right now is working on that. Really, what we are trying to understand is how to provide more information in relation to the linkages between climate, nutrition, and gender. And we are supporting a variety of partners in Africa and Asia to really understand that connection. What are the key indicators that we must follow? What are the bottlenecks? How do we mobilize more resources for targeting those interventions that have good results in terms of climate, in terms of nutrition, and in terms of gender?
Thank you so much. That's just so interesting. I think definitely there are some recurring themes. Another one that I'm hearing is this theme of the young people going out and transmitting information to their families and throughout communities. So it's absolutely beautiful. And over to you now, Richard, and your focus will be on education.
Thank you so much. So before I think we do my intervention, I was asked just to do a snapshot of what my organization does, so that at least you have an idea of what we do. Yeah, so Young Emerging Farmers Initiative is a non-profit organization. It's an NGO registered in Zambia. And the organization was established in 2014 and was registered in 2015. Our goal or our vision was to have an empowered youth in agriculture. It was very specific, dealing with young people, because we did understand that young people were the gap that the food system was missing to be able to actually create the transition that we are desiring right now, what we're talking about, because we need, not only do we need the number, but we need innovation, we need creativity in how we're going to transition. So it's just found the values, I think it's similar. Our history, I think I just wanted to just have an understanding. We as an organization, I think, focus on what we call the hold hands model. We work with relevant stakeholders within the food system that are key into ensuring that this transformation takes place. So we've worked with various institutions, from businesses, international organization, government. I think from the previous speaker, I think she highlighted the value of actually having these collaborations and partnerships. So Young Emerging Farmers Initiative had that deliberate action to ensure that we engage every relevant organization or institution within the food system that can enhance young people's involvement. So we focus more on agribusiness. We use the word agro because it's a sustainable way of doing business. As much as we're focusing on trying to transition, promoting sustainable production in the food system, we do understand the realities that young people have in terms of why they engage in particular ventures. Revenue is very important, and we try as much as possible to be very practical, because we're dealing with a population that is dynamic, a population that is a moving target. Their focus is, I need now, not later. And we do understand what sustainability means, because it requires resource, patience. But we also have to understand that young people, for them to be meaningfully engaged, for them to respond the way we want them to respond, we need to ensure that the revenue component is something that we are prioritizing in all our design of the projects and programs that we do. So we engage in agribusiness, climate change and adaptation, nutrition, and other areas. Also, advocacy is something that we value as well, because policy is very key. And this is the reason why we are all here. It's an issue of policy and how we can influence that. So young people also need to be involved. So we do as much as possible. We try hard as much as possible to ensure that young people are involved in policy formation. They are involved in these policy reforms, as well as just to ensure that their voices are heard. So just giving you a snapshot, say we are in all 10 provinces of Zambia. We have been working in various districts as an organization, as a youth organization. It's been an experience where we've realized that there are very few platforms, for instance, in my country, in Zambia, where young people are actually given that space or platform to express themselves, or to also be involved in policy, as well as anything related to the food system. So we are present in over 50 districts in our country, and we've been doing that for the past 10 years. So this project, the CGIAR project, I just wanted to maybe just delve on it a bit, because it's like a model, prototype model of how we design our projects. So the CGIAR project was specifically designed to build capacity in young people to become agents of change in their communities, so that they are able to conserve their natural resources, but as well as ensure that they're increasing their nutrition, food security, as well as income at household level. So the way this project was designed was to ensure that as young people have been capacitated to understand the value of sustainability, they are able to also ensure that their livelihood are taken care of. So this project design models that we would respond to markets. So we're able to design responsive markets, financing as well, and ensure that young people have access to information that they need or that they require to ensure that they do engage in the food system. So we had quite a number of achievements. We engaged over 500 young people directly, and over 2,000 households. I think we're able to see that were reached, and these young people were able to go into their communities, and we could see the change, that adoption of those sustainable production practices were actually taking place. Yeah, so this is some of just the pictures. So one of the things that we do, what we did in this project is, for instance, on my top right there, that's value addition. So young people were able to actually use solar dryers to ensure that the shelf life of the commodities or crops are able to last long, so they're able to sell to markets that may not be available now. And we also do a lot of community engagements. And on my bottom right here, right here, so here, if you can see, it was something that we actually were proud of, because young people were actually connected to a company called Lush, maybe you're familiar with. It's in the UK. It makes cosmetic products and uses honey as one of its major ingredients. So the pricing of that honey was actually better, because it was like 100 times better than the local markets that were available in the country. So this motivated young people to be able to value their trees, because they saw value in their trees. So if I'm able to make a lot of money from this tree, I'd rather not cut it, so that I can use it to do beekeeping and earn money. So we noticed that we were able to conserve over 5,000 hectares of forest in the region where this project is, because this project is in central province of Zambia in about 3 districts, in Chitambo, Serenja, and Mukushi. So the Aka project is just similar to the Zaikala, but just as a small scale. And the same with that project. So this is one of the things that we do. This is actually, it's at a school where an aquaculture project where we're actually promoting fish farming, and young people were able to appreciate how they're able to do aquaculture and engage at that level, and they were able to actually learn how they can keep this fish and the period it could take, and it just motivated them to look at this differently. Yeah, so if you can see that, it was the school boys and girls were trying actually to engage at that level, they're harvesting. Yeah. Okay, this is a boss. Yeah, so we have a campaign we call My Farm, My Swag campaign. So this is a campaign that is embedded in most of all our programming. So this campaign actually talks about changing mindsets of young people, trying to actually make young people appreciate the food system more, to be able to understand that they actually can make this as their career, or it could be a business opportunity for them to engage. And as much as we are promoting sustainable production. So we've managed to actually motivated over 100,000 young people for the past 10 years. And we have linked some of these young people through this particular project to various farms, so they're able to appreciate what is happening out there and learn from these farmers who are actually doing well in promoting sustainable production. So most of our programmings are around promoting agroecological practices, because we do understand that's actually something that is more sustainable and something that will enable us to actually transition in the long run. So we have what we also call farm visits. So these are very key. They are also, this is something that is also embedded in the My Farm, My Swag, but it's a separate program, because it's specifically just ensure that young people are taken to a farm, a future farm, that's what we call them, a farm that is using both technology, indigenous knowledge, and innovation to see how best the food system could transition. So that can help young people to also appreciate what can be done, and also learn from those particular farmers. So we also have what we call the SPA2 project, similar to the Zaikala, but in this project we are more targeting to ensure young people, to ensure that they build resilient livelihood and a just transition. So this project is under ActionAid International Zambia, and these are the 3 strategic objectives that they focus on, but we prioritize the strategic objective number 2, and we are doing that in 2 districts, that is in Gwembe and Chama in Zambia. Yeah, so there's some of the pictures, young people just learning how they could do water harvesting and appreciating in a class, learning about sustainable production and so forth. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Richard. I was just advised that we're running behind a little bit. I think maybe I don't know whether to ask you a quick question now or move to Saul and then ask you both at the end. Maybe I'll do it that way just to make sure that everybody gets their moment in. But what I love about the approach that you talked about, it brings in this whole element of livelihoods to it, which is unique among all these presentations, is that it shows how young people can earn a sustainable livelihood through agriculture, which is quite amazing. So I'm going to ask the question now, come back to you afterwards. And the question I wanted to ask you was about nutrition security and how your program helps to promote nutrition security in Zambia. So think about that for a moment. I'm going to move over to Saul, who's going to talk about finance, and I'll ask both of you questions at the end because we're running behind time.
How much time do we actually have?
Take 6 minutes. I'm so sorry.
Right. Is this working? Yeah. Working? Great. I can't do this in 6 minutes, so I'll do a small bit of it. I'm going to skip all of this. So, you heard that there are different ways that we can think about the elements of planet and human-friendly school feeding. I think you went through that framework before I was able to join the session. So I'm just going to give one example from each of these and talk about where that financing might come from. I'm going to start with ingredients. I'm going to skip lots of slides. And go straight to the example of high iron beans in Tanzania. So this is a fantastic product because not only are these bean varieties much more dense in nutrients, so much more nutritious, but they also are more climate resilient, some of them. So I'm taking a particular example of this Calro-developed bean variety, which was developed in Kenya. It matures in 70 days, it tolerates very low rainfall, and it's higher in iron and zinc. And I recently had the opportunity to visit a project which is providing this to school meals in Tanzania, in the Iringa district. And this was really a project that spoke for itself, because these beans are so much more, you get so many more beans in each pod, and so much more pods on the plant, that it's immediately attractive to the farmers who are growing them. And so the communities that have been experimenting with this are going way beyond the demand for the school food, but also all the farmers in those communities want to start growing this product. What are some of the options for integrating an intervention like that into school feeding? Well, the best option, the most likely option, would seem to be government budget allocations. And the big example that we've been working with in GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, is the Nigeria program, which has planned had planned a massive investment in school meals. They wanted to reach 20 million children, and their big idea was to put one egg in to the school menu every week for each child once a week. And so they had actually developed budget lines for all of this, and they were going to roll this out at very large scale. And then, of course, the Naira collapsed, the Nigerian currency. It became, the local food inflation became absolutely beyond belief, and the cost of this program became completely unmanageable for the government agency that was planning to roll it out. And so they started to take a step backwards, say, maybe not this year, it's really going to stretch our budgets too much. So I'm afraid this is a sad story. It looked so good that it was going to be rolled out at scale, but at the moment it's kind of on hold because food price inflation has put an end to it. Another option for this kind of thing is for parental contributions. And many countries have a system where at least some of the food for the school meal is provided by the parents. And that goes back to this bean example. This is really something feasible, because if you suddenly are planting a variety that is twice or 3 times more productive than the variety you had before, then yes, you can afford to devote a small amount of that to your kids to take them to school to contribute to the school feeding. Probably got time for one more example, clearly not all of them. You talked about clean cooking. I won't go into clean cooking except to say clean cooking can be financed through carbon credits. That's a reality now. Maybe go on to this example of waste reduction. This is something that we've been working with in Ethiopia, where incorporating milk into school feeding was a priority of the government. And one of the issues was, how do you actually keep this milk in the school in a way that it doesn't immediately go bad? Because there isn't really a system in place to store milk and to make sure that it is storable over a longer period. And so we actually worked with students in the Danish Technical University as our first challenge project. And we set those students an innovation challenge of coming up with a technology that could be used to store milk and reduce the spoilage of milk over a much longer period. And they came up with a very simple technology, which was then also investigated by various groups in Ethiopia who adapted it for the local environment and came up with their version of that. And here you have something that's a really quite simple technology, but enables schools to provide a cup of milk as part of the school field. And in case you didn't know, that is Amharic for milk, just to make the point clearest. And how could you try and do that? Well, this is all about those companies that are going to be developing and marketing this commodity. So this is actually a product that can be sold on the market to anybody who's involved in the milk retail value chain. And how it's likely to be SMEs that are going to be producing this kind of technology. So can we think about SME type financing, impact investing, to really scale up access to this kind of product so that every milk house in Ethiopia can use them, and equally every school. I'm going to go to the end now, sorry. The conclusion. My conclusion was, and you're welcome to have the whole presentation for the rest of it, but the conclusion was, it is definitely challenging, the sustainable financing of school feeding. Let's not pretend otherwise. But adding the consideration of the environment and nutrition actually doesn't add a lot to the cost. The financing landscape is full of opportunities, but they're very, very fragmented. And there isn't really good examples of people trying to bring all of this together and produce a comprehensive approach to financing with all of these different elements. And there's really limited compelling examples to draw on as yet, which is a challenge for all of us. Let's produce those examples and share them with the community and get them scaled up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be really bad and just add 2 minutes again here. And so I'm going to ask both of you the final question. So Richard, my question to you, which I guess if you can respond in 30 seconds. I'm so sorry to do this to both of you, about the contribution to nutritional security in Zambia of your project. And then Saul, my question to you right afterwards will be, what are the opportunities of establishing these principles that you talk about, not just with regards to finance, but other aspects of sustainability right across the food system. So over to you, Richard, and then you can pass over to Saul. Thank you, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that we've been doing as Young Emerging Farmers Initiative is enhancing knowledge among these children, the knowledge as well as involving them in climate resilient production systems, which basically exacerbate them being able to have practical understanding and connection to nature, because young people are able to actually know how to produce their own food. That also ensures that they appreciate how food science is, issues around food science, biodiversity and so forth at an early age. So the more we have been engaging them, we've seen a trend where more young people actually are doing more than just farming, for instance, grain. So that has also contributed to biodiversity in terms of production as well.
Great. What really struck me when I was looking at this landscape was how siloed the different elements of the school feeding framework are, the ingredients, the sustainable cooking, clean cooking, the minimizing food waste, and the engaging students as agents of change. And yes, all of those come with potential financing solutions, but I'm not aware of any project that has attempted to package all of that with their own appropriate financing solution all in one big effort. And so that to me seems like a really obvious way forward to try and do this, where all of those things are taken into account with both a lens of environment and nutrition.
Thank you both so much. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for attending the session, both here and virtually. I know it was live streamed, and thanks to our experts for making themselves available and for these amazing presentations. I think this is such an exciting area to be in, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all the different ways that different countries employ school feeding in the months to come with this